One thing I really, truly believe in is dogfooding, using your product, being your own customer, and like filling that role makes you better at your job in measurable ways. Because I can like talk to the CEO and be like, these are my use cases, these are must-haves, all these things.
Because you're actually talking as a customer.
Oh yeah.
Hi everyone, you're listening to Scaling DevTools. This is a really cool episode because I'm joined today by Andrew from DevTools FM, which is one of my favorite podcasts and you should absolutely listen to. Andrew, thanks so much for joining.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just for background for people that haven't heard of DevTools FM. So DevTools FM, do you want to get in and give an intro to it?
Yeah, sure. I'll say our tagline. DevTools FM is a podcast about developer tools and the people who make them. So that really encompasses all of the stuff that we do. Is we want to focus in on a person who is making something that helps developers' lives easier. And then we also try to like go into who they are, where they came from, if it's an interesting part of their story, and how that kind of like led into what they're making now.
Yeah, and I think like as one of my favorite episodes is the one that you did with Mitchell from HashiCorp.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I remember, it was like you were talking about like the origin story. You were talking about like the licenses. You're also talking about Mitchell's flying.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a lot, actually. That was awesome to hear. Like the man loves flying.
Yeah, it's cool. It's cool to dig into people's other hobbies, especially if they kind of like tangentially connect with programming. Like he had built out like a flight panel for himself, which is... Yeah. I love creating software for your own personal needs. Like I've tried to make startups maybe in the past, but they've all just turned into like personal tools that I use to like enhance my life. And then I might share them with my friends sometimes.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about a little bit about like some of the projects that you've built? Because you've maintained and built quite a lot of open source projects yourself.
Yeah. So my first delve into open source was with a project called GIMP. It's the JavaScript image manipulation program. It was created by a guy in Ireland who is now a politician. So the library had basically languished for like 2 years because this guy was transitioning from being a developer into being like a person in political office and caring about Cork, Ireland. So like the project was in need of a maintainer. There were hundreds of issues, and I was like, I want to dip my toe in this. Like at the time, it was early in my career. I kind of idolized these people I saw in like the NPM package authors field. I was like, Syndra, he's like a titan. He is like a sizable percentage of the ecosystem. I just kind of want to like tap into that. And GIMP definitely allowed me to. Like through GIMP, I have like billions of NPM downloads. And it's just because I maintained this thing and kind of like kept kicking the can down the road of like making sure it worked on like latest node and make sure that it like actually was like a fun thing to use.
Yeah, maybe that's actually like a good question, and not everyone would know what it's like to actually like maintain a popular open source project.
It's rough, and that's like one of the main themes of my podcast is like maintaining that open source, because like everybody who like likes programming can probably get a library out the door, but like maintaining it and like taking feedback and knowing when to say no. Like those are all hard things that you learn by doing the thing. So it's like when you first start out, you make a package, you're like, oh, people have come to this. They want me to do things for them. They want me to enable things for them. But as you get further along in your open source career, you go, oh, new additions, I'm like more scared of those, because it's like now it's when someone contributes code to your project, it's more like you're owning their code for the foreseeable future and the features that they brought. So it's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh, I'll add all the things for you. And then you kind of get stuck into this place where it's like, well, I've added so much stuff that I don't even really care about, that I now have to maintain. And I have to like, now if I want to make a breaking change, I have to care about all that stuff. So it's just like learning to say no was probably the hardest thing for me at the start. And some of my projects, you can see that in where it's like, oh, there's a lot of features here. There's a lot of stuff in core that doesn't need to be. And where I'm at in my career now, I'd probably say no more.
And like, does it like on a weekly basis, like how much time do you think you spend now?
I don't do it as much as I used to. At my old position, I was more like officially like paid to do open source. So I did a lot of it. Yeah. I would just like openly just like create lots of packages, take on lots of maintenance burden. But then when I got to my new job, I was much more product focused. So I've spent a lot less time on it.
Yeah.
One interesting phenomena I heard about before I experienced it myself was GitHub notification anxiety. Like people with like crazy amounts of libraries, their GitHub notifications are like thousands and thousands of pages long. And it just people complaining at you or requesting things of you. And it's a very kind of like thankless thing. So like over time, that red dot on GitHub started to give me more and more anxiety. So now I back up and I try not to engage as much, but I'll come through like maybe like once a week, once a month and like see, is anything crazy wrong? Usually it isn't.
So what, like when you see like people creating issues and stuff, like, yeah, like how,
PR is welcome.
Yeah.
I've typed those two words more times than I can count. And
Really?
when a PR comes in, I prioritize PRs. So
Really?
if there is a PR, I will go review it. If it's a thing I'm okay with, I'll merge it. If there's an issue, I'll breathe through it lightly, go, yeah, that seems like a problem other people experience too. If you want to fix it, feel free to.
Yeah, that makes so sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And do you think that there's something that like DevTools maybe don't typically understand about like open source?
A lot of DevTools companies these days are doing it right. Like they're focusing on DX first. Like I look back to like before the internet and like dev tooling was like archaic and like hard to use tools. Like you had to be a genius to like even read through the docs and understand what's going on. So I think DevTools companies nowadays really do have that focus on like just like making the simple case simple and making it just obvious. Like that's also what I like about the JavaScript ecosystem is that like for all you can say about it, we have great documentation practices compared to everything else. Like people put up whole static websites just to like show you how to use their React component or just like like how to use their CLI library. In the past, you just have to go read a bunch of like code examples or like try to find something, but it was hard.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. I didn't realize there's like so much of it. I never considered that there's a big difference between the JavaScript ecosystem.
Oh, in my opinion, it's huge. Like other ecosystems feel like almost like they're adversarial to the developer. Like they assume you know a lot, but JavaScript is kind of this like lingua franca of like programming languages. So like people, when they do their docs, will literally like point them at like complete beginners. And like in other programming paradigms, I just don't see that as much. They kind of like assume you're like a senior level already and you know how all the things fit together, but that's not really true for everybody.
Yeah. So what made you want to start a DevTools podcast?
I didn't at first. Like by virtue of myself, I'm a very lazy person, and like
everything you've said so far doesn't point to that. But,
it might not, but like something that stuck with me early in my career was like the best programmers are the laziest, and those are the ones who are going to automate things. And when it comes to a lot of things, I'm very lazy. And when I was approached by my co-host to start the podcast, my first thought was like, I don't want to do that. But like one thing I really truly believe in is dogfooding, using your product, being your own customer, and like just filling that role makes you better at your job in measurable ways. Like of the things I took from Intuit, my first job, that was the biggest thing is be the customer, have customer empathy. So when I started a new job at a podcasting company and a random person online said, hey, want to start a podcast? I went, I don't want to, but that sounds like it'd be great for my career in like a bunch of different ways. So I did, and it was amazing for like my job because like I've probably put the most hours in the product of any engineer at the company, and like it just helped me kind of like grow my cred there too, because I can like talk to the CEO and be like, these are my use cases. These are must-haves, all these things.
Because you're actually talking as a customer.
Oh, yeah. It was so cool, like in the first few like months of DevTools and Descript, where I'd be like, there's this feature, there's this workflow that doesn't exist, and it's making my life terrible. The one that it was we had just integrated video, and you could have sequences where it's like, it's your face and my face. And how we wanted to edit it was your face is on screen when you're talking, my face is on screen when I'm talking.
Yes.
Just that alone, doing that for my 1 hour podcast took me an hour and a half of just clicking, and I could feel my wrist starting to hurt more and more. So I was like, one weekend I was just like, I'm done. I'm coding this.
Really?
It will take
just
me
hero code.
Yeah, it is going to take me as much time to code this as it is going for me to do this time. And of course, that wasn't true. We all know with automation, you think you're going to save a lot of time, but you really just invest a whole lot of time up front. And so that's what it was here too. But with that feature, I think I probably saved our customers like thousands of hours of just like mindless clicking in the app and error-prone clicking. So like being able to do those things at this new job was just so fun, and it's so fun to be able to tie it back into the podcast. And literally every week as I'm editing my podcast, I probably file 3 on good weeks, 3 bugs. On bad weeks, I can file like a dozen bugs.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Wow.
But I have like laser vision for like what the product should be at this point. I also built the design system. So like during that, I was like my pixel vision, like honed in. Like I could see like, oh, that's 2 pixels off right there. Like that doesn't line up how the system should be. So like I can look at the app and probably find a few bugs like even right now.
That's so funny. So what was the impact? Like you were just suddenly, did you become like the kind of...
It has been weird because like I have like this large body of work that's like Descript specific work basically, and people know about it. So people will just randomly come up to me and be like, hey, can I use your podcast files for X, Y, or Z? And I'll just see myself pop up in places. So like the CEO's doing some product announcement videos. Oh, there's my face because they needed a multi-track sequence project to like show off this new capability.
Really? So you're kind of like the darling, the showcase podcast.
I'm probably like the most known podcast internal one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I'll see product managers use my videos for test stuff. One thing that really like tickled me was our AI team, like we have a AI clips feature now. Yeah. And I was at the offsite. I'm like, I don't use it much yet. And they're like, what are you saying? Like, you're the one person that should use it. We trained on your shit. Like, if it's going to work well for anybody, it's going to work well for you. And it just like, it kind of blew my mind. It's like, wow, my dog fooding exercise has become integrated into this company at a very weird scale.
That's like seriously cool. This is like such a cool, like, career tip or whatever, like just like dog food. But I think it's the same for startups, right? Like,
yeah, it's the same for developer tools. Yeah. Like Auto, that automated release tool, the reason we built it is because we needed it. We were developing a bunch of monorepos that needed to have automated releases, and we wanted them to be like easy to use. And we used it a whole lot and got it to the point where it was like, this thing's solid as hell. We can open it up and start like adding other languages because we know like the core is built really well, battle tested, works on our complicated repo. So dog food helped a lot there too.
Yeah. Do you think dog fooding is like, has that been have you seen that in a lot of the successful dev tools?
I would say like, I don't think you can make a good thing if you don't use it. Like it would be hard for me to work in an industry where it's like, oh, you're making like accounting software for like professional accountants. And it's like, well, I can't dog food that. I can't really understand the needs of the customer at all. So like, in DevTools though, it's a great way to go.
Yeah. Kind of like a broad question, but like from the guests that you've spoken to, have you spotted any kind of patterns or things that you would do for your own DevTools?
One that struck me is just like people will have obsessions, and like those obsessions might not yield a company or a tool like year one. Yeah. It might take them till like the 6th time they've rebuilt it to like find a thing that's like, oh, this is what I wanted. This is like a useful thing. It's taken all of those past failures and kind of like rolled them up into like the new great thing. Yeah. And I think that is a great theme across most development. Like when I'm talking to juniors, like basically my only advice is go build a bunch of side projects. They're all going to fail. They're all going to go nowhere, but you're going to learn a whole lot. And I think that's true of DevTools too. It's like my personal obsession problem is static site generation and storybooks as of late. I've built if you categorize the storybooks as static site generators, I've built 8 now. And it's like, and even though none of those things have become like a tool that anybody other than me and maybe some people at Intuit still use, I learned so much throughout those. Like I learned like my first documentation generator, that is how I learned Webpack. Like it was all done through Webpack plugins. I had to learn every single part of the config just to like get it going. And like that work paid dividends. Like nobody told me to do that. I didn't need to do that. Literally now part of my job is like, I'm the Webpack guy. Cause like I've been in those trenches and that's been done through side project after side project, just like making things that nobody really cares about.
Interesting. So making the things that nobody cares about.
But you care about them.
But you care about them. And eventually
it might become a company.
Will probably care about.
Or a dev tool. Yeah. Like my current iteration of the static site storybook generator is called Fwoosh. It's a fast storybook. So Fwoosh goes right by you. And the first time I built it right when Vite was coming out. And I tried to make that work. And like it did work, but I had to do so much like bundler stuff that it just became, by the time I was done, I had it done. Like I looked back on it and it's like full docs, full working examples. It just felt icky to me in the end. And I'm like, do I want to support this? Do I want to take on those GitHub notifications and people coming to me wanting to use my thing and me not really caring or wanting to because it's gotten to a point where I don't like it anymore. So I shelved it. And 2 years later, which is around now, I got interested in it again and built it all on React server components. And even if I never shipped this thing, I've learned an immense amount of knowledge about how server components work, where they make sense, why they're actually cool.
Yeah. And are you going to try to get people to?
This time around? Maybe. The things I built it on are still experimental themselves. So I'm still not quite comfortable like releasing a storybook replacement tool that's built on like a React RC at this point. There's still lots of like hard edges around it, but it is like also very exciting and very promising. Cause like with Storybook, like the hard part is like the main problem is slow startup slowness in general. And it's because it basically has to statically analyze everything and then serve you a page based on that. With React server components, you can do, you can basically just simplify the model where like say for property documentation generation, how it works in Storybook is they have a Webpack loader. It goes, oh, it's one of the files I want to generate docs for. It does that. It inlines it in a global in the file. And then how it works on the front end is it looks for that global in the file and then strings it all together. And it's just like, you look at it from afar, you're like, that's kind of icky. Like in all senses of the word, it feels like it's hacks, hacks upon hacks. With server components though, it's like, what essentially we were doing there is like, we want to run code on one computer, serialize the result, and then show it on another computer. And we were doing that through the bundle at this point. But with server components, you can just go, oh, they're just React components. Here's a boundary, render suspense boundaries, and it all comes out nice in the end. And all you're left with is like, it's a React component that calls some Node APIs, hands it over to the front end does front end stuff. So like, I've been very excited about React server components since then, because it's just like the world of possibilities open up. The downside of that right now is it's just like the only way you can use them is Next.js, and like it's very frustrating for that to be true. There is a thing called Waku, which is from Daishi. He's the guy who does like Val2 and Zustand and like all these different state management things. But it's basically like React server components without Next.js. This is what it would look like in like a clean room setup. And it's just like, oh, it all makes so much more sense now. Yeah. And I just want to see projects like that kind of like go mainstream, because like Next.js is a great tool. It's powerful, but like, I don't want it to be the only way to build a modern React app. That seems so backwards to me. Yeah. Even though I know like core team members are at Vercel right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so if you were going to put it out there, like how would you do that now?
I wouldn't put it out there until I'd fully integrated it into our design system and then ran with it for a while.
So I dog tested it.
Yeah.
Dog-
We would dog food
fooded
it for quite a while before I would release it. And then once I released it, I probably just like tweet it and then just be good about saying no. Cause like
Okay.
a lot of people are going to want to add a lot of stuff and
Yeah.
I'm going to have to be the arbiter, the benevolent dictator for life saying yes and no to what I think fits in the project. But I haven't done that yet. We'll see. I got sidetracked by another open source problem I wanted to fix.
What was the other?
Just like there's the pattern where you have a bunch of resizable panels in like a page. There's a nice React component for that from Brian K. Vaughn, or I don't know if it's K. Brian Vaughn he used to be on the React team, works at Remix now. It's really good, but it doesn't support pixel values, and all of my designs come in pixel values. So it just doesn't work. And I forked it for Descript and added all of that stuff that I wanted, but it got again to that point where it's like, yes, it works. Do I like looking at this code or reasoning about it? No, I don't. So I rebuilt it in the way I would build it with pixel values and all that. It has XState in there too. So it's like just one file, long file, but it's easier for me to understand. And I think I'll probably get that out before I get Foosh out.
That's really cool.
But I'm easily distracted.
No. Yeah. That's super, super cool. Sometimes people ask me about like podcasting, like DevTools say, I'm interested in starting a podcast. Like, should I start a podcast? How should I start a podcast? I'm sure you have a lot of thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's a lot more work than you think it will be. And it's always more work. Like, it's very rarely are you going to go, okay, it got bigger, now I do less. Like, even if you hire an editor, that just frees you up to do more different things. Yeah. So like, if you don't have like 4 hours a week to devote to it, you probably shouldn't do it because it's going to take at least that long. A great way, how we started out was by doing it every other week. That lessened the burden on us a lot. But if people want to go out there and podcast, I would encourage them to do it because like it's been a great experience for me. It's grown me so much as an engineer. Like when I started, I was very much only versed in like front end tech and like the new hotness there. Now I'm just like looking everywhere for like, is that a cool thing? Is that a cool thing? Like local first, I didn't know anything about that or probably would have never been interested. And now it's like, oh, those are really cool technologies. And like the growth I've experienced as an engineer has made it all worthwhile. Just being able to know about all these cool tools and how to use them and how the people that made them reason about them is invaluable to me.
Yeah. That makes sense. And do you think that there's been other benefits around? Like you were mentioning, like all the people that you've met and like the conferences and
it's crazy the people I've met at this point. Like when we started, like our first 3 episodes was just like us, and then we interviewed one of Justin's coworkers who made Patch Package, and then we interviewed one of my coworkers who were just like doing random stuff. And I would have never thought it would get to the point where I'm like interviewing Guillermo Rauch of Vercel. Yeah. And it's just like, those conversations are like, they're very fun to have, but they can also be very stressful because like we are the producers. We have to keep the conversation going. Yeah. Dead air is the enemy. Yeah. So there definitely has been some like, it's sometimes hard to grapple with that. Like it's very stressful sometimes to hop on a call and it's like, well, I'm talking to DHH for an hour today.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. How did you prepare for the DHH call?
For him, it's basically the same process as everybody. I start by going to your Twitter. Yeah. I open up every link I can find on you and I just start reading. So like with him, a lot of that episode focused on his recent like spicy programming takes. Yeah. So I just like went into those, read the blog posts about them. Like I was there for the TypeScript drama. So like I had my questions to ask. That interview was interesting because every guest that comes on our podcast, I say at the start, please talk as long and as deep on any subject as you want. You can never go too long on anything. And he was one of the ones that just like ran with that.
Really?
Like there were 20-minute stretches where me and Justin said nothing.
Yeah.
And like in that situation, it's like we're just trying to get the best out of him. So it's like kind of like just like poking the bear to go in the direction that we want him to. Like there were a lot of things I wanted to say during that episode is like kind of retorts to like what he was saying. But I was like, best to not just like
let it ride.
Yeah, let it ride.
Yeah.
People were crazy entertained by that episode. The following that man has, I don't think anybody else in tech has. It is a crazy amount of fan worship. Oh, just go to the comments on the YouTube video.
Yeah.
Like literally everyone is like, oh my God, I love this man. I love every word he says.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting to see how people react to the different creators.
Yeah, was that by far the kind of like most
that
engaging
was probably our biggest episode as of late, just because he has such a huge following. But like we've had a few ones that pop off, but they're always just like big people. So like we had Evan Yu on like episode 13. That was a good episode, but it had really bad audio. So I was like, damn, like, wish it could have been better. We had Rich Harris. He also had bad audio. It's like the higher profile the person, like it seems like the worst setup they have. Like Guillermo Rauch, he was in like a skyscraper. You can see all of San Francisco behind him. Terrible mic, potato quality camera.
Someone needs to get the DevTools founders, successful guys, better mics.
Yeah, please don't use your AirPods on my podcast. They're the worst.
Yeah. So what do you think makes a good if someone's going to start a podcast for their developer tool, and they're like, Andrew, come on, like what should I do? Like, give me what.
Like if you had a developer tools company and you wanted to start a podcast for that.
Yeah.
I think the Jam people are good people to look at for community building. I think a lot of dev tools and probably especially dev tool startups are all about community and building a bunch of people that are excited about the thing that you're making. And they're doing really good at that. Like they have their own podcasts. They bring on people, I think, that are users and like kind of like dive into the stories, and like they're basically just hour-long testimonials. But they also do a lot of like events and community stuff that way, where they just get a lot of people out there, which can't be bad.
Yeah, true. That makes total sense. Yeah, and like what do you think makes like a good podcast episode?
That's a hard thing to answer, because like during the episodes, as I mentioned, I have kind of like producer anxiety. So sometimes I'll finish recording an episode and be like, that was terrible. Like I said one thing wrong and the whole episode was off. Then I'll go back and like watch it during editing. I'm like, oh, okay, that was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
But it's hard. It's almost hard for us to have bad episodes, because like most people are pretty interesting. And if you just ask the right questions, they'll probably say interesting things.
Yeah.
I rely a lot on research and like looking into their past words. So sometimes I'll ask questions and it's like, I know the answer, or I know this is like stupid in X, Y, and Z ways, and you're going to react to it in these ways and go on the rant I know you're going to go on. So like it's good questions are almost like manipulation.
Interesting. Yeah, manipulation. Do you think when developers are like listening, like why do you think developers listen to podcasts actually? Like, do you think you have a goal of like?
That's a very good question, because I myself do not listen to many developer podcasts.
You don't listen to them?
No.
Yeah.
So
do you listen to any podcasts?
Not developer ones, really.
Not developer ones.
Like maybe some comedy ones, but even those I don't listen to too much. Like my podcast was started as a dog fooding exercise. Someone on the internet said, hey, you want to make a podcast? I wasn't at all really like, I can see the value in my own. Like I try to just make good content, like have good conversations. Like I know what a good interview is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm not much of a podcast consumer myself, which is like a very odd thing to say when people ask me.
It makes sense, because some people are like creators, but they don't really like consumers, I think.
Yeah. And I especially with the guests that I have on my podcast, I try not to consume other podcasts from
Really?
Yeah, like I don't want to be influenced
By someone else?
in the questions that I ask this person.
Interesting.
I want it to come from like my interests. So a lot of the episodes are like fueled by what I'm actually interested in at the time. Like we had the creator of StyleX on, and I'm interested in CSS styling. So like I could go very deep, and like we often get like when we prepare for an episode, I create a GitHub discussion. I put like 15 questions on it, and the reaction we always get is, wow, this is so thorough. And I'm like, okay, I did my job this time.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah, it sucks when I get to the end of the doc and I don't have enough questions. I'm like, what's your favorite plugin to your thingy?
Yeah.
But sometimes that has a good answer too.
Yeah. Do you have a goal with like
with money?
Kind of I don't know, like just in general, because you've got like, it feels like it's kind of like the work you're doing is the goal, and the career is like you're kind of doing the podcast to help in the job and stuff.
Yeah, we've made money off the podcast. Like another thing to consider when you're starting a podcast is it's not free.
Yeah,
like you're gonna end up paying for a lot of things, whether it's equipment, whether it's software, whether it's people. You're gonna pay for something.
Yeah.
So like with that in mind, if you're like, oh, I want to podcast indefinitely, it's like, oh, do you want to pay $2,000 a year for the rest of your life to do something?
True.
So at that point, it's like, well, we got to make money off of this. And like at DevTools, we went through a bunch of different like phases of that. So at first we were like, we're not going to do that. And then we saw the bills and we're like, oh, we kind of want to do that. We don't want to like we want to up our release schedule also. We were on a 2-week release schedule. So it was like, how do we get to a week? Well, getting to a week is not saying, Andrew, go do this every week and edit everything. It was like, okay, we need an editor. How do we get an editor? We need money. So the first iteration of that was we tried Patreon, which I would say don't do Patreon unless you have an enormous following already. It's very hard to grow that in itself. And it feels like you're hurting your own content. Like the way we structured it was the free episode was like around 45 minutes. And then how I would get it down to 45 minutes is that I'd try to go in there and like cut out large chunks that like could still flow, but still kind of leave you hanging. And it felt icky because it was like, we're not releasing something from like this person that gave us their time. So it feels like wrong to them a little bit because we like hid some of their words for profit, which sounds odd. And then also the other side of it is we're charging like just regular people. Like why should we take our like fans' money? It's an odd relationship. So we tried that for like a year and then ended up going, okay, sponsors is probably the way to do it. We've been doing Patreon for a year. We're getting $140 a month. That's like, okay, that kind of pays for an editor for maybe one episode. Still not getting us there. So we ended up going with sponsors. We were really lucky in that we announced that we wanted sponsors, and Raycast signed up for 20 weeks.
That's so
like, didn't really ask questions about our price or anything. And that like, it definitely legitimized it. Because before that, it was like, well, can we get sponsors? Can we show that we're like, people are listening to us, or that the advertisers are going to get any value out of this? And I had a lot of anxiety about that too, because it was just like, what if they give us an affiliate code and they're going to track it and be like, oh, you ran one ad, you didn't do anything, so we're not going to give you any more.
But you did well on that. Right? So.
When we sign people up, we usually sign them up for like 10 weeks. And so we had Raycast for 20 weeks. We had Code Crafters for 10 weeks. We just had Clerk for 10 weeks.
Oh, did you?
And then the next 10 episodes are sponsored by Mux.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
And it's very heartening when we have somebody on and they're like, oh, I saw you have sponsors. We want to sponsor you. And I'm like, yes, thank you.
In 10 weeks.
See you in 10 weeks.
That's so good. That's great. Well, it's a great show. And I think it's very unique. And I'm not surprised that everyone wants to sponsor it.
Well, I think you were our first Patreon subscriber, if I'm not wrong.
And I've got for anyone watching, I have got the DevTools FM shop.
Shop.devtools.fm.
Shop.devtools.fm for all your developer tools merchandise. Andrew, I think we're probably at time, so I think it's probably time to get some pizza.
Yeah, I'm down.
Thanks so much for joining. It's so cool to kind of have you on, and Thanks for making a great show.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.